Hi, I'm Dan Cottrell from Rugby Coach Weekly, and I want to talk to you about some of the great activities we've got on our site about passing and handling. The first activity is a very simple one to set up, just needs 3 players, but you can mix it up with 2s and 4s. Lots of chances for the players to get lots of touches on the ball, and in this exercise you're just working on some of the simple technical stuff about keeping your hands up to receive the ball, maybe working on the elbow position, the shoulders and the movement. I quite like using 3 players rather than pairs because the players have got to turn a bit to make the pass. In this next exercise we're still not putting too much pressure on the players, but it is still working on some of the basics of passing, understanding that the ball needs to go backwards. So we've got 4 players here, but you could work with 3 or even 5. Simply have them run out, and then as they move into the box they spread out, working on moving the ball to the final player in the 4. They will be working on passing the ball before they get to the final line. That means that they'll have to pass the ball backwards, and you can probably work out some ways of adding pressure by maybe bringing a defender who puts pressure on the first or the second player. Now this session is called tag and pass, but again you can adapt it for older players. The first player runs out, and when he reaches the cone he has to pass to his supporting player. That supporting player takes the ball on until he reaches the next cone, and then he passes. Because it's a race, the players will be working out what they can do to win, and therefore they'll be concentrating on technique. Now they may in their pairs work out what works best, or you can give them a couple of nudges, for instance keep your hands up or call for the ball, or even better see if you can run onto the ball. And again the idea is that the players want to win and they'll be looking at different ways of doing that. I would suggest that they may work in the same pair a couple of times, but then mix and match to give them different varieties. And if a pair is winning quite a few times, perhaps you can push them back to give them a bit of a handicap for their starting point. Okay, let's put a little bit more pressure on them and actually put a defender in front of the ball carrier. In gate chase, the ball carrier runs out to a gate either to the left or the right of them, trying to beat the defender to that gate. That means that they're running at pace, as you would hope they would in the game, and attracting the defender towards the ball. Once they reach the gate or get through the gate, they then have to pass the ball back inside to their supporting player. Now, as you can guess, with the younger players this can not always work very well, but I would be patient. You can start the defender a bit further back. Again, this is an exercise that you can see how you can develop for older players, putting a little bit more pressure on the ball carrier by moving the starting position of perhaps the defender or changing the gates to be in different, maybe wider positions. Okay, here's an activity which a passing game for the warm-up. Probably more with younger players, stick them on their knees in a group maybe of 3 or 4 in a line, and by isolating their hips and their shoulders they're moving the ball up and down the line. Make it a race after a little while, and they will work out again some techniques to move the ball effectively, perhaps getting their hands up, reaching towards the ball, moving the ball across their body rather than in a sort of like a pendulum movement. I've found the kids really enjoy this, and also this is a pretty good one for older players and more experienced players, just to isolate some of the body parts before you move on to maybe more sophisticated passing games. The passing race is one of my favourites. It's very easy to set up, very easy for the players to understand, and because it's a race it's very competitive, and you'll see the younger players jumping up and down in anticipation of perhaps winning, and you can set quite a few handicaps and make lots of varieties within the game to keep the players challenged. In simple terms, 3 players start on a line and they pass the ball down to the third player, who races maybe 10 to 15 meters forward to beat the other teams. Each time the players will work out better methods of passing the ball, and then you can start to add in some variety where maybe the second or third player can stand in slightly different positions to give them a better chance of winning. I've varied this around by perhaps changing the starting positions to handicap the players who are winning, and of course it's always good to mix up the groupings so they're working with different players. Remember to change the starting positions so they're not just working from left to right but also from right to left with their passing. With younger players or players where you're trying to introduce new skills, I find the exercise box out is particularly useful. It's a little bit more complicated to set up and takes a bit of time for the players to get used to, but once they are used to it, it will be an exercise that you'll use probably weekly to work on different skills, and you don't just have to use handling skills, it could be contact skills, it could be defensive skills. But here I'm going to work on the clearing pass, which is particularly important for younger players, under 9s, under 10s, under 11s, where most of the restart passes from a breakdown are a pass off the ground, which we call a clearing pass. So in this exercise, 4 or 5 players start in a small box next to the area. You get them passing the ball around, so it's a little bit chaotic, and then you shout go, or you blow a whistle, and the current ball carrier runs out into the box, and every time you blow a whistle or shout tackle, that current ball carrier goes to ground. Presenting the ball, the next player comes in and will pass the ball off the ground to a teammate. You'll blow the whistle several times throughout the box, so there'll be a chance of maybe 3 or 4 clearing passes, and the idea is that they're working on their technique, which you can reinforce, and it is slightly chaotic, so you don't know exactly which player will be the clearing passer. New players, well, and actually old players, often drop the ball, so we have to get used to the fact that the ball's going to be on the ground, and we have to practice that aspect. One way that I do it is a little exercise called ground ball. This is pretty physical, but it does get players used to the fact that they've got to bend down to grab the ball. I tend to use it with a 2-on-2, with a tackle bag on the ground, and then I'll place a ball either side of the tackle bag. 2 players will run in and try and grab the ball. You can probably guess from where you can see from this picture that the players are coming from either side of the ball, but you can have them coming from different angles. In this activity, we understand that one of the difficult parts of the game is taking the ball at pace. In other words, running onto the ball. Now, even with older players, they struggle with this, but you will find one of the major problems with young players is that they don't have that awareness or indeed the skill to run onto the ball, which means that they're going forward, which is one of the main principles of attacking rugby. Again, we've made this little exercise into a race, but you can run it without being a race so the players can work on their skills without pressure and then add in the race to make it competitive. In simple terms, the initial ball carrier is standing still and 2 players run back to a starting line and then run back forward to run onto the ball, and it's a race to the end line. The players will be thinking about their spacing and their distance and their position in comparison to their supporting players, so you could run it with 2, 3, 4 or even 5 players. If you get it to work with 5 players at under 10s, then I will be personally coming down to your rugby club to give you a medal, but you have to film it. Otherwise, I think 2, 3 players is enough, and the players again will probably have a lot of fun trying to win this activity and win the game. So that's just 9 of some of the hundreds of activities that we've got on the website. Often I find that coaches use these activities and come back to me and say, I really enjoyed using this activity and I've put this little twirl or wrinkle onto it, and we want them to be a starting point, a way of inspiring you or giving you slightly different ideas on how to keep your players active, involved in purposeful training where they are working on good technique. As you can see, I've tried to put as many game elements into it, make them into competitive games, but sometimes we need to take the pressure off, give them a few skills, a few techniques to think about, and overall Don't sweat it too much if they don't get it right first time. Give them plenty of chances to have a go and then return to the activities at a later date. So they are all on rugbycoachweekly.net. Go over to the website, click on the handling tab. That will bring up a whole bunch of fantastic and enjoyable and tried and tested activities and games for you to try out, and I really hope you enjoy using them.